will be led by Dr. Pavel Gladyshev, Associate Professor of Computer Science at University College Dublin and Forensic Computing and Cybercrime Investigation Specialist. The other members of our panel are Professor Sanjay Goel from University at Albany, we remember from before, Professor Raymond Choo, expert in cybersecurity and digital forensics at the University of Texas at San Antonio, and Professor Dragan Parakovic from University of Zagreb, Faculty of Transport and Traffic Sciences.
Thank you. So it's a pleasure to see all of you here. Thank you for taking time off your busy schedules to listen to us. And I'm actually happy to be here, right now. So I wanted to start by introducing the topic. So we are speaking about smart living here in this conference. So I want to start by looking at the definition of smart. So what is smart? What does the word smart mean? Well, according to Merriam-Webster dictionary, it means intelligent, bright, witty. Another meaning of the word smart is good looking, stylish or elegant. Yet another meaning of the word is what we basically talk about in this conference, having microprocessor inside. You know, the best object I've ever purchased was smart dumbbell. It didn't have microprocessor inside, it was just an ordinary dumbbell, but it looked smart. So maybe that's why it was called that. And smart living is good, as we have learned already today and yesterday. But adoption of new technology comes with its own problems. And if we scroll in the dictionary a little bit further down, we suddenly come up with a definition of smart as a sharp local pain. And I think everyone involved in information technology knows that occasionally technology gives us sharp local pain. And there is even a definition that was given once by Leslie Lamport, a famous computer scientist, that distributed system is the system in which failure of one computer that you never knew existed makes your computer useless. So the challenge of security is to keep all this nice, smart infrastructure up and running and making our life easier. And yes, in our hopes, in our dreams, we want technology to help us live better life, provide us with better urban management, personalized services, transportation, healthcare. And unfortunately, any technology is a double-edged sword. And when something gives us positive things, it also creates possibility for misuse. It can cause fires, disasters, cyber attacks. It can be used in ordinary warfare to make life of ordinary citizens miserable. And security is multidimensional phenomenon. And we are fortunate today to have a panel of 3 leading experts in the field with us. And we are going to talk about these issues today. I would like to start by asking Sanjay, give us a definition of smart city, maybe as a continuation of your previous talk earlier today.
All right. Thank you, Pavel. And thank you again for being here and patiently listening to us. So I think that people have a misconception about a smart city. They think of it, something that automatically runs, everything happens on its own, but it's made of a lot of small components. The fundamental thing that has changed between a regular city and a smart city is the concept of sensors. So if you put a sensor on almost everything that you have, for instance, if your refrigerator has a sensor, if your every light in your house has a sensor, if you have a sensor in your stove, if everything is driven by sensors, then you can control it much better. I think that's the whole concept of the smart city, that you have sensors everywhere and you have communication, which is collecting data from these sensors. So a connected city is a smart city, right? So let's take an example. So for instance, if your garbage can has a sensor which says how full it is, right? And it can communicate that information to a central server. You can schedule garbage pickup when the garbage can is full, rather than having filled up the garbage can being picked up every third day or every fifth day, right? Let's take another example. If you have a sensor connected to your oven, right? You can start the oven before you came home, right? So that the cooking is already starting, the oven is already started. So the whole idea of a smart city is to make it more efficient, more convenient for you, and at the same time being more energy efficient. We talked about AI and how AI can be used for smart transportation, right? That's a part of smart cities now. That instead of having traffic lights where people stop, if we're able to just route the traffic so that they can go through the intersection without stopping, now that will be a smart city kind of an objective, right? In addition to that, uh, improve transportation, obviously, is one of them. Reduce energy consumption. I think that's the key part of that. Key part of smart cities is making them more sustainable. So by collecting the data when people are coming in, when they're leaving, when do we lower the temperature of the house, when do we raise the temperature of the house, keeping it at optimal temperature, all of these things together make for a more efficient, sustainable city. Now, the key challenge that comes from a smart city is the security vulnerability. Where are the vulnerabilities? The vulnerabilities come from all the data that we collect. We collect data about people's actual behaviors. When are they leaving the home? When are they coming to their home? When they raise their heat, when they lower their heat, all the data is collected, right? For use of the power companies. We have data about all of the purchases they're getting. So all this data which is collected in one single source or one single place for making the city more efficient also makes people vulnerable to different kinds of attacks. It could be a breach, it could be more surveillance by the government. A lot of these things can happen. So that's one of the key concerns that we have. The second concern we have is that it is made up of a lot of sensors. When we have about hundreds and thousands of sensors distributed through the entire ecosystem of a smart city, what can happen is people can breach those sensors directly. The sensors can go bad. It can give faulty information, again, leading to disruption of the city. So we have a smart city which is more efficient, but it also becomes more fragile in some way because it can break if then the sensors don't work. So we need to take the good with the bad. So I think in general, that's how I would define a city. We have thousands of sensors which are collecting information about different aspects, different devices that are a part of the city, and making the city more efficient using that data.
Thank you, Sanjay. That's a great introduction into smart cities. And I actually wanted to tell a little bit about our own project. So I've been involved in a European project called ADA. And one of the things that we've explored there is the use of the potential of smart city infrastructure as a help in detection of public disturbances. Nowadays we have a lot of, well, not a lot, but we do have instances of terrorist attacks happening. Every now and then somebody crashes truck into a crowd, and then it's all over the news. My own background is digital forensics, so investigations, helping law enforcement, and I've spent 18 years of my career teaching how to investigate computers. So we thought computers are useful in criminal investigations because they collect a lot of data about users. Now, obviously, computers collect this data not to spy on users, but for users' convenience. For example, every time you press on the Start button in Windows, it shows you the list of recently started applications. And in order to provide this convenience feature to the users, Windows records, for example, how many times you started a particular application and when was the last time you started it. And when a crime occurs, these accidental sources of information are quite useful in reconstructing the picture of the crime. So we thought, why don't we explore the possibility of using all this data collected from many different sensors for crime prevention? So the idea is that nowadays a lot of public surveillance is camera-based. Some corporations like NEC, for example, it forms major part of their business, provision of surveillance cameras and applications of these cameras. But the problem with surveillance is that it identifies the person. Once you're on camera, it's quite straightforward to ascertain that you are that person in frame. And there are many other sensors which are not as revealing public and personal information as cameras. For example, everyone carries a mobile phone nowadays. And if we look at some of the location-aware applications, like museums, you might have a special badge and an information system that reacts on you approaching an exhibit. And when you approach, exhibit starts talking to you, telling something about the work of art or installation. So we thought, why don't we try and exploit data collected by all those location-aware services and not the cameras? So the idea was roughly this. If we are in a museum and we track location of individuals, if they start running in different directions altogether, something is going on. Now, obviously, if just one person runs in a museum, maybe they're just crazy, or maybe they just need a bit of a stretch. But if everyone starts moving, that's a cause for at least checking it out. So we did some initial experiments, and it appears that with at least motion-based sensors, detection is quite robust. So this graph shows the blue line is the noisy data coming directly from the sensors, and the red line, or not red, orange line, is the output of our detectors. So by just smoothing over the data with an averaging window, we are able to detect it quite reliably. Now, this is obviously just one experiment to detect that the person started running, and a combination of these different detection from different mobile phones or different wearable devices need to be correlated. But however, it appears to be a very simple thing to do technically. But that creates a lot of problems in terms of preserving privacy of individuals. And as Sanjay correctly pointed out, privacy is very important. So our current thinking in my research lab at the moment is roughly this. If we enroll help of internet service providers or location-aware service providers, it's not something groundbreaking. For example, if we look at the way Interpol cooperates with antivirus companies, it's very beneficial because antivirus companies have millions of their programs installed all over the world. And when new computer malware comes up, because they have so many different sensors around the world, they're able to pinpoint the geographic location of where the malware first appeared. And that helps investigators in identifying, well, at least narrowing down the possibilities of the origin for that piece of malware. That information is not identifying because the aggregate information is provided to law enforcement. And we thought that if we're talking about information as vague as a lot of people started running around in the museum, that's probably okay from privacy perspective. But obviously, the challenge is to prove that there is no privacy leakage occurs in this kind of services. And then there are all legal technicalities that we need to get around. Now, if we enroll service providers into this exercise, and if service providers voluntarily provide this information to law enforcement, for example, then they still own the data, and according to the GDPR concerns, they're not divulging the data to the third party. But as I said, it's a gray area. So that's something that is to be explored. Now, I firmly believe that it will lower cost of security for everyone and make it more affordable to everyone, because security costs. And by introducing new security features, we all pay more. And by doing it this way, we can lower the costs. However, obviously, there is no business benefit for internet service providers to add something like this, and the political will on the part of politicians, European Commission, is obviously a requirement. So that's us. That's our brief foray into smart city security. And I would like to ask my colleagues, Dragan and Raymond, to introduce themselves and to say a few words about their vision for the topic of this conference. On this panel.
Hello to all. I prepared some presentation, but I think that it's better to save time and provide just a few information about me, and I will skip the presentation. So I will not skip the presentation. Okay, just a few words about me. I'm coming from the Faculty of Zagreb. This is part of University of Faculty of Traffic and Transport Science, part of University of Zagreb. I think that all of you knows what is the Croatia. Very great place, very safe place, good for the enjoy in the summertime. So we use Croatian food and life. So we are open for any collaboration, tourism, and something like that. So I will provide you with just few information about me, my work, and results of my work or my teamwork with my colleagues, because that's important to understand what we are doing related to the smart cities and smart city security. Maybe we have some different point of view for some guys here, but I would like to provide you what we are and what we are doing. Just for information, there's a lot of heads written in the paper. I'm head of department, head of chair, head of lab, a lot of heads in national level. President of one great association which promote new innovative technology and new innovative service worldwide. But from international aspects, I'm visiting professor at the University in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and I'm mentor at the Swiss Business School, Swiss School for Business Management. It's very great because that is from economic field, and it's totally different from technical field, which I work in Zagreb. Additional and international expert at MS3, because they changed the name, International Center for AI and Cybersecurity in Thailand. So that's just take a picture about me, few information about my university. We are very old. We have good numbers of students, good number of faculties and staff. Just few picture about faculty, and I will provide information of organization of faculty. What does it mean? So we are focusing to few different studies, focused on traffic and transport system. Why is this important? Because all of that is addressing the smart city solution. So I represent information and communication. So we are 20 years ago, we are focused just in telecom industry, but now we are talking about connecting everything with everything. From this point of view, we are talking about the connectivity in smart city or industry 4.0 or something innovative involved. So just few pictures from different labs. I will focus on this information. In my department, we have 3 chairs. Chairs are dedicated for the lectures. But here we have 3 labs. First one is lab for security and forensic analysis of information and communication system. And second one is for modeling and optimizing information and communication networks and services. Last one and the younger one lab is the lab for development and research of information and communication assistive technology. It may be very interesting for this part of conference, because in this lab we are trying to provide some innovative solution for people with special needs. What does it mean? Old people, sick people, blind people, people in chairs and stuff like that. But people with reduced mobility, and they want to live like all others. So when you provide some new technology, new innovative service for this group of people, it is very hard to training that to use service. All of us, it's very easy use Skype, Google Maps or something like that. But people who is blind, it's not possible to use on easy way some kind of service. In this point of view, security of providing the good real-time information for this class of users is very, very important. And this is the research we are doing a lot with our faculty. Just few information about labs. 2 other labs. We have focused in labs in this domain. We are addressing research in the communication network security and forensic and device security and forensic. So I agree with colleagues, this is most important to find the data and source data from different kinds of device. From this point of view, we are addressing some innovative solutions, how to detect data from the smartwatch, drones. We are preparing a few projects in area of detecting data from cars. It's especially interesting in project we are doing with company Raymond Automobile. I don't know, do you know what is the Raymond? Raymond Automotive, the fastest car in the world. No, electric car, fast one. You never heard that? This is the best one. So okay, I will not say, I'm not salesman. I don't want to sell that car, but this company is providing a new company, and this we are trying to make robot taxi. Different our task in this project is to prepare innovative service for a special group of users. So not robot taxi for the it's not nice to say normal people, but we are trying to create customized value chain for the people with special needs, with dog, a very happy brown dog from blind people. It's a very issue how to move the person and dog to another place. So just few information about the laboratory. Another one, in this one we are providing the science research projects for modeling the concept of the new communication networks. 10 years ago, it was very easy. We can use the public telephone network, and it was easy. Today, we are talking about 5G and trying to create the innovative service based on stable communication infrastructure. Okay, I will be fast. I talk about that. Here you can see just a list of our projects. I'm very proud can say that we are part of the consortium in area of quantum communication. So we have very good point of research. If quantum K distribution is very innovative state of the art. It's not state of the art, it's beyond the state of the art communication networks. It is very clear that it's long time frame to use this communication network and this security mechanism in smart city for next maybe 10 or 20 years. But we are trying to do today something for the future. And we have great results in this area. We can discuss all about quantum communication distribution after this part. So I will finish here. I don't just want to provide a lot of information, just to understand what effective traffic and transport concerns. We have transport, we have traffic, but my part is telecommunication traffic, communication networks, and services for improving some kind of life. So smart cities, our top interest for now. Thanks.
Thank you, Dragan. And I'd like to hand it over to Raymond.
Yeah.
Yes.
Where do I point? Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay, fantastic. Again, thank you very much for having us here today. So I'm going to talk about why cybersecurity matters, especially to the decision maker as well as policy makers. Because cybersecurity is a team sport. It's not just about technical solutions. Because if it's about technical solutions, we have solved cybersecurity long ago. Because in fact, we have heard about cybersecurity for a long time. But these days, cybersecurity still matters. So let me ask the first question. Where should I point? Okay. So let me ask the first question to the audience. So cybersecurity threats, do you think it's a hype or do you think it's something real? How many of you think it's a hype? Is that something happens in Hollywood movies? No? How many of you think it's real? Fantastic. I'm clearly speaking to the right audience. Okay, and again, please raise your hands if the organization or agency you work for has not experienced any cybersecurity threats in the last 12 months or last 24 months. I understand that there are a few students in the audience. So if you have personally not encountered any cybersecurity or cybercrime incidents, including fraud, raise your hand. Okay, which is good. So I mean, maybe after the presentation, I would like to speak to you. I mean, to find out which agency or which organization you work for. But the next question to you is: are you sure your organization has not been breached, or are you not aware of the breach? So that's the next question. Okay, thank you. So I think increasingly moving forward is about, I mean, when it comes to threats, it's not just about cyber threats, it's about branded threats, like cyber physical threats. Because many of the cyber threats, they actually have a consequence in real life. Because I'm sure you have heard of the saying, what goes on in Vegas stays in Vegas. But for cyberspace, it's no longer true. Because what happens in the cyber world actually has a physical real world consequence or real world connection. So for example, I'm not sure how many of you have watched the Black Hat movie. It has been around for at least a couple of years now. So basically, a summary of this movie is there's actually a malware that was actually installed in the chemical plant of one of the critical infrastructure sectors in China. And because of the malware, it actually triggered an explosion and actually leads to a number of consequences in real life. Well, this may be Hollywood, but is that going to happen in real life? Maybe, maybe not. Because I'm sure many of you are familiar or at least have heard of startnets. Well, even though startnets have not resulted in something as dramatic as this, but moving forward, is it likely to happen? Maybe. And again, I don't have my crystal ball with me, so I can't tell you the future, but this may be something that's going to happen in the future. And again, I'm sure many of you have, and when it comes to critical infrastructure sector, many of our nations, for example, in the US, we have 13 critical infrastructure sectors. Actually, the electricity grid is one of them. I'm sure, you have something similar in your own countries as well. So many of these critical infrastructure sector systems that are connected to internet, or even if you are not connected in the air-gapped environment, you can actually implant software vulnerability, or you can actually have installed malware into this machine. So what's going to happen if your system is compromised? Beyond your data being stolen, of course, data is very important. But what if it's not just about trying to steal your data, or trying to compromise or take over your system so that you can actually do something nefarious? And again, I think Sanjay has mentioned about some of the AI tests in his keynote as well. For example, is it possible for us to actually design systems or devices, inexpensive devices, things that you can purchase off Amazon, to actually try to fool the AI systems? For example, by just wearing a t-shirt, like what you can see on this slide, wearing this t-shirt to actually fool the system to think that you're a bird, you're not a human. Or trying to fool the system into thinking that you're not a human, but you're a stationary object, or something along that line. So in fact, there's a lot of work going on in this space where it's actually quite easy to actually design systems or use to actually design devices to actually fool AI systems into trying to fooling the system to think that you're something that you're not. And again, I'm not sure how many of you have watched Fast and Furious 8. And again, this scene from Fast and Furious 8 is about the hackers taking over control of the vehicles and then crashing it. So think about it. Is it possible to do it in real life, or is this something only in movies again? So is it possible to actually try to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in driverless vehicles and then try to crash them into places of mass gathering? For example, I think you mentioned there has been a small number of terrorist attacks in European countries, I think, in the last few years. So many of these attacks is terrorists actually get behind the wheels and then they crash these trucks, big trucks or vehicles into places of mass gathering. But what if instead of someone getting behind the wheel, terrorists work with organized criminal groups, cyber criminal groups, and try to identify and exploit vulnerabilities in vehicles. So instead of someone getting behind the wheel physically, they get behind the wheel remotely or virtually, and then try so they can actually carry out a coordinated attack. So that, for example, I mean, at 12 noon or at 1 p.m., which is a busiest time of the day, I mean, take over control of these vehicles and then crash them into, say, the Wall Street, the Wall Street or something, or some places of mass gathering, so that you can actually maximize the impact. And again, when it comes to some of these cyber attacks, it's not just about taking over control of vehicles. It's not just about single incident. I think it's about, a number of follow-up consequences as well. So, for example, if you are to carry out a cyber attack, so instead of just taking over the vehicles and driving them into crowds, if you are also able to compromise the network system, the telecommunication system, the emergency response system, so that when something happens, there's no way for you to find out. There's no way for you to actually get access to 911, or there's no way for you to get access to ambulance services, so that you can actually dispatch the frontline responders to actually the scene. So in that case, we can actually maximize the chaos of this terrorist incident. And again, this is actually a series of attacks we can bring together in a single incident. That's why I mentioned that it's no longer the case of cyber attacks only have the consequence is only restricted to cyber, because it really has real world consequences as well. And again, I think you mentioned about the drones as well. So again, is it possible to actually identify vulnerabilities in drones so that you can actually use drones as actually weapons? You can actually get them to crash into buildings, especially into key installation places at possible at your dam or areas that are not completely accessible to cars or even the White House or something sensitive as well. So again, you may question, is this Hollywood or is this something that's going to happen in the real world? And when it comes to cybersecurity, as I mentioned before, I think we have heard about cybersecurity for the last 10, 20, even 30 years. So is it a thing of the past or is it something still relevant? I hope it is, because otherwise I'll be overjoyed. So I think if you look at some of the reports coming out from the US, or the Office of the National Counterintelligence Executive, they have started to focus on cybersecurity at least for the last 10, 20 years. And if you look at the more recent report of 2022, cybersecurity has not decreased in importance. In fact, cybersecurity is actually more important these days because of smart city, smart nations. And I think smart nation may be something new to you, because I'm originally from Singapore. So Singapore is very small, it's an island city. So smart city is, to Singapore context, is actually smart nation. Because Singapore, I think you were just in Singapore a few days ago, last week. So we realized that Singapore is very connected. So if you bring down a system, there's actually cascading effect. So that's something you have to think about as well, especially from a smart city, from a policy perspective. And again, you find that when it comes to cybersecurity, it's very important to many countries, including, I believe, in many of the countries that you're from originally. But when it comes to challenges, there are a number of challenges, because I think we have spoke about many of the benefits of smart city. Because if you have data connected, it's going to facilitate optimum decision making. It's going to help make our life better, improve the quality of life. But at the same time, there's also challenges, because we are collecting so much data. So the question is, how do you actually ensure the data is secure? Because you don't want to collect data for your adversary. Because the same data that your government or your company is using can also be exploited, by your adversary, whether it's nation state or organized cyber criminal groups, to use against you, to use against the society. So how do we actually secure this data? But when it comes to cyber threats, the thing is, cyber threats, for example, if you want to rob a bank locally, I have to be here physically, right? So that, because I have to be here to rob the bank. But when it comes to cybercrime, I can rob the bank from anywhere in the world, anytime, 24/7. I can even be in my garage wearing my pajamas to rob a bank. So cyber threats is actually very different from physical threat. But when it comes to trying to attribute or trying to determine who's actually behind the keyboard, who's actually behind the attack, how easy it is, especially those working in forensics, or people in forensics, how easy it is to actually for you to attribute or to identify who the attackers is or where they are from.
It's very difficult. And when the judge asks, can you prove that this person was behind the keyboard? Forensic expert usually can only say no.
That's right.
To the fury of the legal professions.
Yeah, that's right. And also when it comes to data, because all these cyber activities, especially for cybercrime, it actually take place across systems located in different countries. So from a forensic or from a law enforcement perspective, even your national security or your intelligence agencies, how do they actually go about collecting data? Because the data is actually not within the country. It can be in other different countries, or it can be held by organizations in different countries, where your court warrant, where your documents from your court does not hold in many of these countries. So if you are not able to collect data, so how are you going to go about investigation? How are you going to go about identifying, the attackers? And also, when it comes to, it's not just about attributing the source of the attack. Also trying to determine what is this incident about? Is this cybercrime? Is this cyber espionage? Or is this an activity that's carried out by nation state? Now, the question you may ask is, why does it matter? Who cares whether it's cybercrime? Because, at the end of the day, if I'm a victim, I'm a victim. So who cares whether it's cybercrime or whether it's carried out by someone in the garage or someone, or a nation state? Well, it does matter from a response perspective. So think about it, when it comes to cybercrime, who's going to respond? Who's going to investigate? In most cases, it will be your law enforcement. For example, in US, it will be your FBI, or even in some cases, Secret Service, or your local and state law enforcement. But when it comes to national security, who's going to be investigating? In most cases, it will be your national security agencies, your intelligence agencies, for example, NSA, CIA, and so on. And again, but the thing is, when it comes to classifying some of these activities, it has been very challenging trying to determine whether this is cybercrime or something that's more important, like national security event. Look at SolarWinds. I'm sure some of you in the audience will be familiar or at least careful of SolarWinds. How many of you has heard of SolarWinds? No? Okay. Do you want to explain briefly to the audience what is SolarWinds?
Yeah. Supply chain thing, SolarWinds.
Right? Okay. So basically, it's actually a vulnerability that actually affects a number of systems that were used by a broad range of companies and also agencies as well in many countries. So there's actually cascading effect, when it comes to system vulnerability. And in fact, if you look at this particular incident, it has been classified as cyber attack by APT groups, which is advanced persistent threat groups, possible nation states. It also has been classified as cyber espionage or cyber war, yes. So as you can see, there have been, I think in some cases, it has also been classified as cybercrime. So even within, this is actually a very high profile incident that has affected many countries. But just from this different classification, you can see that it has been classified in many different ways. And again, there's really no consistent definition of what constitutes cybercrime or what constitutes cyber war. Well, cybercrime is much easier because if it's criminal in the country, then it's cybercrime, right? But it's much harder to determine whether it's cyber espionage or cyber attack by APT groups, because many of the tools or techniques they use are similar to cyber criminals.
Thank you, Raymond.
I'm still on.
Oh,
I still have a few more slides.
yes, yes.
Sure. Okay. Let me try. So when it comes to responding, it's much harder to respond if you are not able to determine the source or the nature of the incident. So when it comes to deterrence, there are different levels of deterrence, I guess. So it can be overt display of cyber capability. For example, you show that you have the ability to actually respond, or it can be sanctions. So for example, I'm sure many of you are aware that US has carried out a number of sanctions against, say, certain Asian country. They're organized. Private companies from a certain Asian country, I guess, by banning 5G infrastructure or having introduced the US Chip Act. So yeah, so this is actually one of the solutions, I guess. Okay, do you want me to continue? I have a few more. Okay, I can stop.
Up to you. If you want to say more, please.
Sure, if you have time.
Yeah.
Okay, sure, no problem.
No, I wanted to say that Sanjay has a comment to something you said earlier.
Sure, go ahead. No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
Go ahead, finish it.
No, it's all right. It's okay, go ahead.
Well, no, I think I want the audience to don't think of the smart cities as a technology. Think of it as a changed lifestyle. The whole concept behind smart cities is of urban planning and redefining society. So think of it not as such that we're putting sensors just to make things efficient, but their lifestyle will change. They're trying to make more compact cities where people have a lot of walkable spaces. Everything is connected to make things more efficient. The whole idea is to make it sustainable. So all the threats that you perceive should also be seen in those contexts, right? For instance, if you have a connected oven and a hacker gets basically breaks into your security system and is able to control the oven, he can basically burn the house down, right? They can randomly change the temperature up and down, making you uncomfortable. They can get access to the cameras inside the house. So these are the threats that you need to worry about in smart cities. The goal here is to redefine your lifestyle, which is a more connected lifestyle, staying in more compact spaces, more community spaces, and being more energy efficient. So that's the principle behind it. So all of the threats that we're talking about, we need to take that in perspective of how that influences an individual. That goes beyond just data security, beyond just privacy. It's about how your lifestyle can get affected by some of the threats you're going to offer. The second thing that you need to think through is smart cities means that the refrigerator that costs you, let's say, €1,000 is going to cost you €2,500 because it'll be all smart and have all the sensors. So the cost of building this smart cities is humongous, and which means the cost of houses, cost of the residences that we create is going to be a lot. So at some point, we need to reckon as a society that while we are making it more efficient and a lot of cost is going into building them, where is the sweet spot? How much technology do you want to put in? So it doesn't have to be completely smart. Doesn't have to be completely dumb. At some point, we need to start figuring out how much intelligence that we need to put into these things. I don't think we have had this societal debate yet. So we are still talking about the bits and pieces of smart cities, what the technology is, what the threats are, but there are more fundamental economic issues, more fundamental societal issues. How much surveillance do people need? Right? In some of the authoritarian countries, with all the data on these citizens, they will not only be able to control the efficiency and whatnot, they'll be able to control the lifestyle. People will be afraid to do things because somebody might be watching. Right? So there are deeper societal issues that we need to look for beyond just technology issues. That's the point I wanted to bring up. I did not want to interrupt you.
That's a very good point. In fact, I'm sure many of you in the audience have smart TVs. So think about it yourself. So where do you actually have your smart TVs? Is it in the bedroom? Is it in the living room? In some cases, maybe in the bathroom as well, right? When you're using your spa and so on. So think about smart TVs. What capabilities do they have? I mean, in addition to projecting, what you want to see, do they have cameras? Yes, I believe. Most smart TV has cameras, they have speakers as well. So what if your smart TV is actually compromised? So they are actually recording you and what you are doing without you knowing. Because I know when the camera is on, there's supposed to be a flickering light. But the thing is, there's also malware or there's ways for you to actually circumvent that, so that you can actually covertly record the surroundings of yourself without you knowing it. So think about that. That's actually something about lifestyle as well, because we have seen a number of cases where smart TVs have been compromised to actually do surveillance, to actually take recordings of individuals and use that for extortion cases. And also moving on, when it comes to some of these cyber threats, especially in APT groups, that's advanced persistent threats, you find that many of these incidents, they're actually going under the radar. 20 years ago, 30 years ago, if I hacked the NSA system, I want the whole world to know about it, especially NSA, because I want to get employed. I want to get employed by a security company. But these days, it's no longer the case. If you hack a system, you do not want anyone to know about it because you want to maximize the hack. Basically, you want to stay under the radar. You want to steal as much data, as much intelligence as possible before going for extortion. Of course, you can also try to extort the company, so that if you don't pay me, say 3 Bitcoins, I'm going to release your data into the world. And many of these are actually persistent and more sophisticated as well, especially those by organized cyber criminal groups and also our nation states. In fact, I think that there has been a number of cases where you can see that many of the organizations or the agencies that you work for may not even realize they've been breached until 6 months later, 24 months later, or even a few years later. That was why I asked the first question. How many of you are actually not aware that your organization has been breached in the last 12 months? In some cases, the answer no to that question doesn't mean that it's a case that your company is secure. It's just that you may have been breached, but you're not aware of it because it's under the radar. How many of you have heard of false flag cyber operations? Yes, no? Okay, so basically cyber false flag operation is trying to implicate someone behind a cyber attack. So for example, I use the common tools or techniques say commonly associated with Russian hackers or with Chinese hackers. For example, if I use Chinese language or some of the tools that are commonly associated or used by Chinese hackers, but the fact is I'm actually not from China, so I'm trying to implicate them. So cyber false flag operation. So that's actually one definition for that. And again, how easy it is or how difficult it is, and again back to back to the question about how easy it is to actually attribute the source of an attack. This is going to complicate matters because the thing is, if you actually have very sophisticated attackers behind this, trying to carry out a cyber force operation, it's going to make trying to identify the source of an attack or the nature of the attack much harder.
I have a comment on that.
Sure.
You're absolutely right. It's not that it's easy to introduce simple things like using Chinese language, Chinese phrases. But we actually did a research project maybe 10 years ago trying to build a tool that fakes evidence. And it turns out that there are some limits to what can be done because evidence is a totality of facts from the environment. And it's very easy to fake server logs, for example. So at some level, although some planting of evidence, superficial planting of evidence is possible, if we dig deep enough, we can see inconsistencies.
That's right. I think it also depends on the sophistication of attackers as well as the knowledge and the skill set of the defenders, the investigators. So it's actually a cat and mouse game, I guess. Right.
Yeah.
So okay, I'm sure some of you in the audience, or I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand. So some of you in the audience may have used dating apps. So you may be thinking, because dating apps is common, I mean, in the society, I mean, whether it's US or Ireland. So you may be thinking, so what has national security to do, or national cybersecurity to do with dating apps? Well, think about, I mean, what information is collected or you are sharing with, with dating app provider. You are sharing, your basic information, your name, your gender, your age, and so on, but also your sexual preference, and also many things that are more sensitive that you will not share on, say, TikTok or Facebook, right? But many of these dating apps are actually not secure. In fact, we did a study of many of these dating apps a while ago. We find that there are many of these dating apps, they're actually not designed with security in mind. It's very easy to conduct simple attacks, even a man in the middle attacks, trying to actually compromise the information. In fact, in one of the studies that we actually investigated a number of common dating apps or popular dating apps, we find that we are even able to intercept the authentication tokens. Because, for example, I believe it's Tinder. You actually need to have a Facebook account in order to use Tinder. So we are able to actually intercept the Facebook token so that we can actually log in as you into your Facebook account. So that we can actually get a lot of information about the user, for example, not beyond the dating apps. And in fact, you may be thinking, so who cares? Who is interested in my dating profile? Well, depending on who you are or who you work for. For example, I think in one of the study that we have, one of the study over there, we are okay because dating apps, there are different categories. There's normal dating apps like Tinder for male, female, male, but there are also dating apps for individuals with a different lifestyle, different sexual preference or different lifestyle. So for example, in one of the dating apps, we will actually edit. One of my students actually installed and actually worked on the dating app. He was actually able to identify which neighbors in his apartment are actually users of the app. So the app is actually for swingers and people who are interested in group activities. So this can be potentially embarrassing, especially for example, senior or government officials, also for even a professor, right? Because you do not want anyone to know that you are using these apps. Because you were actually able to identify who are actually the user of these apps and a lot of interesting information as well. So in fact, it's no surprise that even the US government, they are trying to force the Chinese company to sell a gay dating app that's Grindr, because potentially this data can be used for extortion or can be used for honey trap. So this is actually in a smart city or in a smart nation context, many of the applications or services that we are using, you may not think about their relationship with cybersecurity or national security, but because of the nature of their user base, some of these data or some of these services actually have a cybersecurity or national security implications. Something as simple as dating apps that many of us are using. I'm not using it, but I'm not sure about you, but okay. So when it comes to cybersecurity, and again, you may be okay. So I think this kind of reinforces the fact that many of the consumer technologies that we are using, as simple as smart TVs or dating apps, they have cyber or national security implications.
Just wanted to say that the paper that Raymond has spoken about is going to present it at the ICDF2C conference in New York later in November. So if you're interested to learn more, please register and come along.
Still open, yeah.
And the conference is run by Sanjay. So you can see a connection here. So, and again, you may be thinking, why are cyber criminals so successful compared to law enforcement? Well, because law enforcement, first of all, we have to work within the boundaries of law. So there are things that we can do, there are things that we cannot do. Similar to national security or intelligence agencies. There may be more lax in a sense, I mean, when it comes to things that they can do and things they cannot do compared to law enforcement, but they are not at the same scale as cyber criminals. Cyber criminals, as the name suggests, criminals, they don't care about the law, as long as they don't get caught, right? In fact, there used to be a joke. If you want to attack a bank in China, do it from Thailand. But no, do it from Taiwan, because the chances of you getting caught and extradited to China is very slim, or vice versa. Similarly, I mean US, Eastern Europe and so on. Right? And again, when it comes to the security, layered defense is not necessarily effective security. I mean, from a CIO or CISO perspective, it's not just about, okay, I'm going to ask for 2 million in my budget next year, so that I can purchase more fanciful bells and whistles to actually install my system. That's not going to work, because it's not just about having layers and layers of security solutions. It's about trying to integrate them so that it's actually working effectively to actually mitigate some of the risks. But when it comes to cybersecurity, as I mentioned before, it's actually a team sport. It's not just about technology or CF. It's actually, I mean, it actually involves decision makers. It actually requires public-private partnership, because many of these threats do not just affect your company. It actually affects many organizations within the country, or even your peer organization in other countries as well. So it's actually useful to have information sharing, so they can actually share data, so that you can actually respond to some of these threats in a more time-efficient manner. I think you want to say something?
Yeah, we slightly digressed from the smart city topic.
Right.
So I have 3 topics for discussion.
Sure.
So maybe
Sounds good.
when you feel comfortable, maybe we can switch back to the topic.
Sure.
Thank you very much, Raymond. That was enlightening presentation in many ways. Thank you. So now this is what I came up with, the topics. If my colleagues or anybody in the audience want to discuss something up, please feel free to do so. But yeah, maybe we open it to the audience first and ask if there are any specific questions the audience wants us to talk, because we can talk between ourselves forever. Yes.
I don't know if there are microphones or not, but I wanted to ask, because you're talking about the threats. Okay, there's coming. Well, I wanted to ask, because you're talking about threats that are coming from what's called generally evil people, hackers, terrorists, etc., and then we are trying to prevent these threats by having better security systems, more complex ones. Do you think that these systems that are here to prevent these threats could also be abused by, for example, the government, because they're trying to have more control of the populace or trying to sell them for marketing reasons? This is also a threat of the security. We should actually prevent that, but is it in the end causing the issues? Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm intrigued by the term "general evil people." It's like somebody from fairy tale is probably generally evil. Yeah, like, can I ask you to show Alex first?
So I think you raised an important point. I think you're talking about the interdependencies between the different systems that we have. There are so many interdependencies between these individual systems, the sensor, the communication, data collection, and whatnot. So just these interdependencies creates a lot of vulnerabilities, right? So each independent system may be secure, but just combining multiple systems together creates more vulnerability. The second point that you raised is the role of the government. I think that one of the biggest fears is that once all this data is available, it can be used for surveillance, it can be used for law enforcement. So I think a lot of privacy leak is going to happen, especially in authoritarian governments. They can have total control of the society in terms of what they can do, what their actions are, and that's a very dystopian society. If you have read 1984, the book, you will know exactly what I'm talking about. This is a very dystopian society where the government can control and watch and do everything else. So we have to be very careful. The concept of smart city looks so wonderful, but at the same time, there are costs to it in terms of what we may be able to bear in the long run in terms of surveillance and whatnot. So I think that's a real threat from where it's done.
Actually, just to build on, I think your question kind of leads to the last question. I mean, Pavel's last bullet point. What is the balance between lawful surveillance and privacy of citizens? In fact, I mean, politically correct answer is just to collect the right amount of data so that can be used for law enforcement or for national security purposes. But the question to you is, what is the right amount of data? Because the right amount of data to law enforcement or national security may not be the same for me as a private citizen. Or I mean, even as a private citizen, depending on which culture you're from, which country you're from, your right amount of data threshold actually varies as well, right? So that's actually the $1 million question. And again, when it comes to data, and as I mentioned earlier, the data that you collected is not just about trying to use that to actually to facilitate decision making or policy making, but at the same time you have to make sure it's secure, because the data you collected on the system can also be compromised. You do not want to collect the data for your adversary that can be used against you, right? So I think, and again, I think one of the projects that we have been working on is actually to actually introduce forensic by design. I'm not sure how many of you in the audience have heard of forensic by design. I'm sure many of you have security by design or privacy by design. So basically, forensic by design means that we want to collect, appropriate amount of data, and again, the appropriate amount of data varies in different contexts. So for example, in this particular organization, it may be X, Y, and Z. For another company, it may be A, B, and C. So we want to collect insufficient amount of data. When something happens, we know where to look for this evidence to facilitate the investigation. So this forensic by design is somewhat similar to a black box. So for example, when the plane goes down, where to look for evidence? Which day you look for evidence in the black box or the cockpit recorder. So this is somewhat similar in the context. So we want to be able to build in a forensic black box into an organization, so to help us to collect minimum amount of data that can be used to reconstruct the event. If you know that something has been, if your system has been breached 6 months later or 12 months later. Because the thing is, there is a kind of a spectrum. If you want to, at one end of the spectrum is you want to collect as much data as possible so that you can investigate crimes in case it happened, or when you found out there's a crime or incident, say 12 months down the road. On the other end of the spectrum is you do not collect sufficient data, you collect minimum data that's not going to help you to do any investigation or forensics when you know something has happened. So I think what we are trying to do is somewhere in the between. But where's somewhere in the between kind of varies between contexts.
Thank you. Yes, I
Any other questions?
agree.
So recently, like the last couple of years, members of the European Parliament have been pushing for what's called client-side scanning, where they use neural networks to look at your photos or text messages to prevent certain types of content. It's largely been used to, the argument has been to stop child sexual abuse images, but there's not really a way to audit that, given the sensitivity of the database. And I was wondering what the panel thought about the entire class of client-side scanning and this idea that you can circumvent end-to-end encryption using neural networks, and that it's supposed to make us safer on the internet.
Well, it's supposed to make us safer, but at the same time less private. I think that's government intrusion into people's public computers, right? So I think it's an overreach, but at the same time, I understand that this child pornography is becoming a very big menace around the world. So they have to take drastic measures to do it. So again, and it's a compromise between personal privacy and protecting children. And how much intrusion to do, and how are you protecting people who are innocent, who don't have any of that information, who may just have some other information that may be incriminating, which they may reveal accidentally. So there is no black and white here that it is right or wrong. We need to protect children against child pornography, and at the same time, we need to protect people's privacy from innocently being breached. So as long as there are very strong protections available, so that only people who are relevant are looking at the data, they're only looking at child porn images, everything else is being deleted, it's okay, but there are mistakes in the system, right? People may abuse it. So these are the kind of challenges that we have whenever we have intrusion into the personal data of individuals.
Well, a follow-up questions. There are entire classes of attacks against neural networks that can, for example, steal the underlying database, or where you can imperceptibly change images by changing a pixel or two, so that they aren't flagged by this content. So are you comfortable with the idea that the next meme, for instance, you could be flagged? And so is there a government in the world that you could trust to not expand the content of this database to anything they find questionable.
Right, so the question is, am I comfortable? No, I'm not comfortable with government surveilling individual citizens, but I'm also not comfortable with child pornography, right? So again, what do we give to be able to get something in return, right? So as long as there are protections, I'm willing to take a little bit of that risk to my personal privacy to protect the children, personally, but that's just a personal choice everybody has to make. Yes, well, can the governments take investigations further along? Can they trap innocent citizens in different kinds of things? They can. But again, there is some cost to trying to solve the problem that we have.
Yes, I wanted to support you in that, and just to give a bit of background. When child pornography operations at a large scale became a thing back in early 2000s, I don't know if you remember, but when this child abuse protection legislation was first adopted, there were a couple of big police operations that arrested simultaneously thousands of people around the world. And in many of those cases, the offense wasn't proven to an extent required by the law. Now, I don't have statistics, but I'm aware that there were some cases where this wasn't the case. And at least in my mind, the perception is that the effort undertaken by law enforcement was excessive. It caused more damage to the people who were arrested and later released, to their reputation, than it did in preserving harm. So I'm not completely pro-police. However, at the same time, if you consider the amount of damage that happens to a child being abused, it's horrendous. So I think it's a dynamic situation. So when we introduce new technology, it's an unknown, and gradually we learn the limits of responsibility and of the right way of using it. I can only quote Lao Tse, who somewhere in the Tao Te Ching says, on happiness, you are foundation of happiness. Happiness you contain unhappiness. Who knows where is the limit?
So just to follow up on that, I mean, recently we have been funded by the US Department of Homeland Security to work on some similar topic. So basically, when it comes to, we actually want to come up with an AI tool or AI-based system to actually help us to be able to do triage, I mean, in real time. So for example, if you come across a data container or encrypted hard drive, then, I mean, the thing is, without decrypting the content, without getting access to the actual content, is it possible to scan the encrypted data container so that we actually have a breakdown of the file types within this data container? Because in many of these child abuse sexual exploitation cases, you find that many of these encrypted data containers, they have a large percentage of, say, MOV files, or they have a large percentage of movies or images. So that's why that was actually our way of trying to actually strike a balance between lawful surveillance and privacy. So without getting access to actual content, we want to be able to do a fast triage of the encrypted container, so that if you find that this encrypted container has a large percentage of movies or images, then that actually gives us cause for to get a court warrant. And of course, that evidence in itself may not be sufficient. You may have to take into context possible the individual behind the encrypted container. Is the individual, I mean, a known pedophile? Is the individual associated with, say, a commercial child exploitation ring? So all these information taken into consideration will actually give law enforcement or national security agencies the cause to actually apply for a court warrant to actually do further investigations.
Any other questions?
I think we digressed a bit from smart cities.
Okay, I want to say that I want to place the question following this, but I make only comments. So it seems to me that smart city can easily turn into the hyperprotective parent, and I think it's necessary to watch the limits or keep the balance between the privacy.
Agreed, yeah.
Okay, but the question directly to the Sanjay will be, you said something about the change. And I have a question. If we, all the people who lives in the modern city, needs to change ourselves, should this change be organic, or it will be forced by other forces to push ourselves to change And is it the change correct or not? So that's the big, maybe philosophical, but also the question how we look over the change, because not a lot of people wants to change themselves, because it's resistance against the change, and we know about it in a different field of research.
So I think that's a very important question, and that's what I was trying to bring up earlier, that all technology is not always for good, right? We are giving something up. We're making cities more efficient. We are at the same time making people more efficient by, connecting everything and giving up all the information at the fingertips. But there are dangers, and people may not want to take it. For instance, I don't use a lot of technology, right? I try to, I would rather have a cabin in the forest rather than live in a smart city and be constantly connected to everybody. I think we're already too connected, right? But again, the society is moving in that way. So when you ask if you will be forced to move, I don't think the government will force you to move. I think the economic circumstances will force you to move. If the cheap housing is available in a smart city, right? If your work is very close to where you live in the smart city, so slowly and slowly people will gravitate towards these kind of cities because life will be so much more comfortable. No matter what their personal views are, what the beliefs are, a lot of people may be circumstantially forced into these cities rather than wanting to do it. I think that's what is probably going to happen. People who are strong and resistant may stay away from this, but I think a lot of them will succumb to this. And again, a smart city does not mean that it is fully connected. All these technologies are there. There is an intermediate ground that we have some smart technologies, but not everything is connected. So I think you will see a lot of variations as we go on. There'll be a lot of pushback from the consumers as well. Because once they see what is happening, people will push back. Right now, they're enamored by the concept, well, everything is efficient. But they don't realize the downside of these things. So that's what I'm trying to bring up, that there are consequences. If we start thinking about it earlier, we can probably have some reformation to the concept where we don't fully automate everything, but only bring the most essential elements. That's my thought.
It's organic.
Well, I would add it's organic with certain forces pushing you organically change. Once a gun firearm was invented, it was organically that everyone moved to using it. Okay, and we see another question.
So, one of the cyber defense strategies used is the cyber deception, which relies on like using fake systems like honeypots, for example, to fool attackers, let them attack the fake system instead of attacking real systems, or using like moving target defense, like randomizing the attack, the space like IPs or port numbers or something to fool the attackers. So I'm wondering if if you have an idea about how efficient these cyber strategies, cyber defense, cyber deception strategies can be like fighting cybercrime.
Well, I think you have asked this question to the right person here because we have a $1 million grant from NSA to study cyber deception and how it can be incorporated into organizations. So I think if you look at what is happening, let me give you a little bit of a context, right? So the first line of defense was just perimeter defense, that we put a block around our computer networks and we'll be protected. That has failed. So the next round of defense was, basically constantly analyze log data to see who's coming in and who's leaving. But again, that delays it so much that the damage is already done. So the new realm of security is deception. What people are trying to do is they're trying to build these deception environments where they're building specific types of traps. It's no longer a simple honeypot. They're building specific type of traps so that they can find out what the motivations and intentions are of the hacker. So right now, what happens is people put these deception environments, they get a dump of data, they don't know what to do with it. That is the current challenge with deception environment. They are not being able to leverage all the data that's coming in here. But what is happening is that we're working on research, not only us, but a large groups of people, to try to make deception environments more actionable. So how do we take the data that is coming in and change your security setting and whatever you need to do to protect the real systems? That is not happening. So right now, deception environments are not very successful, partly because they're not well integrated, because security environment of the organization. But over time, they're working on it. That's why there are large grants, millions of dollars in grants to work on exactly this problem, how to make your deception environment more intelligent so that it can give better feedback to the defense. And at the leading edge of this is basically MITRE, who is our collaborator. They have produced two products. One is called MITRE Attack, and then MITRE Engage. And both of them are used in conjunction. One is to define all of the attack vectors, and the other one, all the defensive, deception defensive techniques. So if you look at those, you will get a glimpse of where the current state of the art is.
Thank you, Sanjay. I think our time is almost up. We're 2 minutes before lunch. So if I may, I would suggest moving to lunch. And if you have any questions, you cannot ask panelists directly. So please give a round of applause to our panelists.